Okay, so today I want to cover these three categories of kind of errors I see in the mold world, give you some examples of each, give you some. I actually have like this kind of deep dive about how to think about mold. I'll share with you. I'm going to share with you our new course we have. It's the first time it's ever come out called Toxic Mold Trained, and then take questions. So sometimes when we go to webinars like this, it can feel overwhelming. So I just want you to kind of take it in lightly and just know that even if you learn one thing that you implement, that's amazing. So just like, don't be overwhelmed, right? And sometimes our brains just start getting going like, oh, I don't know enough, and and I would just encourage you to just settle in right now and know I'm here to support you. And we have this great group. And just kind of listen with discernment, listen lightly. And if something really speaks to you that you want to follow through on, do that. This is a big topic, and learning it is something that you have to learn little by little and build upon. So just take whatever piece fits you where you're at right now. So just a quick disclaimer. So, just for education purposes here, we do always want you to work with really a team of practitioners. So this is me. If you don't know me, but probably most of you do. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been an FDN since 2015, but I've been an acupuncturist since 2004. I started my acupuncture career in Portland, Oregon, which we all know is a very wet place. Um, so I was running my practice there. I started a family there, but I was sick. I was getting really sick. I don't know if the first couple places I lived had mold, but when I moved in with my fiance a few years into living in Portland, and then I got pregnant right away, I had a lot of symptoms come up, and some of those were, attributed to, hormone changes or the stress of having a business. But despite changing my diet, learning all I can, I wasn't getting better. I was getting worse. And this is often, people's story with mold, that it can take a while to discover. So I think now there is more awareness, but the more the better, because it's a real shame when people, are becoming very ill, developing really serious diseases, and they don't know why. So once I found out I had mold, it was like, the usual big project in my home. I can share more about that later if you want. But my health was really deteriorated by the time I found it, and we made a lot of mistakes in remediation that made me sicker. So it was a really rough, tumultuous, couple years while that was all going on. And then finally ended up moving to Arizona just to be in a different environment and kind of get a fresh start. And then I sold that clinic I had, and just started working online, and then slowly transitioned my practice into more detox and mold. And this is Coach Mickey. I would love if anyone would have worked with Mickey, if they could share in the comments a little bit about Mickey. She's not here tonight, but she's wonderful. She's a coach who works for me and is going to be my co presenter on the Toxic Mold Trained course. She just has a ton of empathy and is a major learner. She's, learning from Dr. Klinghardt, and like she's learned study from different people than I have. She's been through thyroid cancer and then a pretty intense mold story in her own home and work. So we're lucky to have her. She's really great with protocols and just knowing all these little details and options. So just wanted you to kind of see her face as well. Okay, so getting into these three mistakes. And again, if you are a practitioner, this is kind of written for you, or if you're becoming a practitioner. But if you're going through this yourself, think about how you can apply it to yourself. So I narrowed it down to these three mistakes, but this was like our original, brainstorming list as we were coming up with it. And I was just like, wow, this is way too many. How can I organize this into a way that would be easier. And this kind of came to be because I was at the Cell Core conference this spring, and it's a really great conference. And I thought, well, if I were to speak here, what would I speak on? And I thought, well, I would talk about how to be a better mold practitioner. Because a couple of people got on the stage and kind of mentioned mold offhand, but really, like, it's a deep process. Like, you really got to get in there with your clients and know what you're talking about. Otherwise you can be sort of doing them a disservice. So this is what Mickey and I came up with as we were just brainstorming what we see people do wrong in the process of mold. So the first category I would say is around communication, empathy, and in a broader sense, holding space for your client. And you can hold space for yourself too, right? You're going through something really intense and traumatic. And how you talk to yourself, how you structure your own care is something you can think about too. In my book, I have like a little journal prompt you can do to just kind of simplify, like, what can I do for myself today for my own self-care, and what's like one thing I'm going to do on my mold journey, and just keep it simple. Like, if you're looking for a mediator, say I'm going to call 3 people today, because otherwise you get lost in a big swamp of, all the possible things that could be going on. So, I'll do some storytelling in a minute, but I think as a practitioner, it's really important to, be actively listening to your clients, be acknowledging the difficulty of what they're going through. But on the other hand, creating some structure so that they're not coming to the session just dumping, big stories on you, and you're not really getting to actionable items. So, some of that structure, for us, we always have people fill out an intake before they come in. That kind of lets us know what we're going to need to be talking about and catching up on. If they're new to you, you maybe want to give them a sense of, like, I'm going to ask you some questions off of, the form you filled out, and we're going to review your labs together, and then I'll leave time for questions, and then I will send you a protocol. So that's roughly what we do in our practice. But having that structure is actually calming for your client, just knowing what's going on and knowing they have a chance to ask questions. But also, not everything fits in a session. And sometimes they, have a lot of questions about, like, which foods have mold, and how exactly do I, work on histamines and, stuff like that. This just can be kind of getting too time consuming, and it's something that is something you have to cover with a lot of clients. So if you start to develop handouts on things like histamines in foods, um, or, meditation resources you like, coaches, then you can start giving resources and helping them in another way outside of just the time you have together. So this was me when I was in the thick of mold. You can see how puffy I look from all my lymph is so backed up. My eyelid was twitching. I was having some neurological issues. On the left here is some of the mold and water damage under carpet in my son's room. He had a really bad colony in his room. Um, so just kind of a little throwback to when I was a client and what I experienced. So I definitely often felt like the practitioners I saw weren't being empathetic to what I was going through. Um, they were naturopaths, and they were like, just giving me a lot of supplements. And while I know they really did care about me, I just didn't always feel it. I wasn't hearing back like, wow, I know how hard this must be for you. So I think it's something I might need to remember now as a practitioner too, is just acknowledging, um, and then encouraging them to have outside support, because sometimes when we're going through something difficult, we isolate, and I definitely isolated, and I didn't have much support, and I felt like mold was embarrassing. So, just I think it's in something that's just important for us as practitioners to continue to be aware of, and just if this is for yourself, to provide for yourself. Are you getting therapy or coaching, or even just going to like a sound healing session? Or it doesn't have to be talk therapy, just something that supports you energetically. Are you, getting away for, to visit a friend? Just something that will sustain you energetically. And then the long storytelling. So this is definitely a mistake I've made recently. Sometimes I'll do, like I did an Instagram live case study, and instead of me leading and saying, I'm going to, ask you a few questions and then you can ask me a question or whatever. This woman who was nice enough to volunteer just ended up launching into her story, and she was clearly like really triggered and wasn't really ready to listen. So I definitely have been getting that reminder lately, like always create structure. Because in the end, like I was frustrated and she wasn't getting much out of it either because I didn't set that good container. And the third thing I wanted to mention is client limitations, which I basically, and the biggest one I mean is client's living situation. So, I will hear some practitioners say, oh, I won't work with someone if they're still in the home, or that kind of a thing. Well, I agree, you're really not going to heal still in the home. You have to realize like the person you have in front of you is a person who um, is just trying to figure this out. And I think that it's important to acknowledge you won't really heal in the home, and that it's best to move out, move on, and keep having that conversation. You also don't want to shame people about where they're at. um, it's very personal what they're going through, and you want to help them think of creative solutions to solve the situation they're in, if it's going to stay with relatives or what have you. But you do need to just practice just some sensitivity about where they're at, and not be just ramming your opinion down their throat, in my opinion, because I don't think it helps things very much. So those are just a few examples about client sessions and how to make it a better experience for the both of you, because clients will latch on, frankly, to feeling like they weren't treated well, they weren't heard, they got charged too much, and they won't keep with you if that's the case. People want to feel acknowledged. So also think about it, if you are thinking of doing this as a practitioner, what experience do you want to have in the session or in your career, and what supports that? So let me give a little example here. So we kind of talked about this, like if you want it to be an exchange and that your client feels heard, but you're also kind of leading and making the session um, efficient. Those are things you can think about setting up. And are there things you're saying again and again that you can make a handout for? Um, I will say that your beliefs create some of this, and I'm guilty of this as well. So I spent 13 years working as an acupuncturist, and I was a people pleaser. I was just a big giver. I mean, nobody asked me to do it, I just did it. And I got burnout from it. Plus, I was sick with mold. So when I went back to practice, I sort of had this belief that working with clients would like suck the life out of me and be unpleasant. Like I wasn't mentally quite ready to be back to seeing clients. So my beliefs around it were kind of negative. And lately, I've been really shifting that and appreciating relationships with new clients, leading better, having boundaries around, um, how much I get. Like I have some practitioners say, "Oh, clients are emailing me every day with new questions." That never happens to me. It's because my belief around it is, our relationship is clear. And I don't mind if I occasionally get an email outside of a session, but I think that the boundaries and the expectations are clear. Same for me on social media. Like I don't get people, railing on me and saying horrible things to me because I just don't like put that out there. So I do think if you have any fears around this work, it can be massaged, it can be looked at, and you don't even have to see people one on one if you don't want to. You can do something like I'm doing here and doing more of an educational style. So there's lots of ways to do things nowadays, especially. So it's really exciting. Okay, item number two is environmental knowledge. And this is a big one. There's just too many health practitioners out there talking about mold and they don't really understand the house very well. So here's the thing, the client's coming to you perhaps first, and you're like a point person, right? So you don't have to know everything, but you need to know enough to give them good advice. Because I do also hear, just some bad advice or some lacking advice out there amongst practitioners. So this black and white thinking I kind of already told you about, just saying like, you've got to move or you got to do this, like that's not that helpful. um, but just being a little more aware of like all the options and maybe helping the client be creative in how they can work through their own situation. A lot of people, not just practitioners, don't really understand that mycotoxins are on everything. If you have a real mold issue, they're everywhere, and then they'll bring those belongings to the next place, or they will remediate their home but leave all the belongings inside. And I definitely have had clients who are in that category. And I'm like, they've had practitioners, and I'm like, how has nobody told you your stuff is still making you sick? So we'll get a little bit more into this in a minute. But there's a lot of issues that come up. People who are renters have issues, new builds are issues. And just at least knowing a little bit about what those situations look like is really helpful. Knowing how to assess your home for possible leaks and water damage, which really just starts with free 99, just smelling, touching, looking. You could, move into getting a humidity reader. I think it's a hygrometer. So there's some things you could do that are pretty simple in the beginning. And I see people tend to skip to like an ERMI when they don't even really know like what an ERMI is or what it's telling them. So, just like in the body, we need to know the root cause. Just because we know from a ERMI that there's mold, well, from where? It still makes a lot of questions. So if you're a homeowner, I really encourage like a good inspection first by you and then probably by an outside company. So there's just so much. Air filters can get contaminated. People aren't running humidifiers. People don't know how to clean up mold. When I wrote my book, I got interviewed, a million, like 50 times, and everybody wanted to know about the building. I barely got to talk about the body for 5 minutes. So people have a lot of questions. And I think there is, even if you are just thinking of getting into mold more, there's a lot of room to become a sort of a home coach if that's what you want to do. Because, for me, like I'm still going to stay more on the health side because that's my background, but I'm going to have some home knowledge. If you want to flip that and have more home knowledge, but have a health, background, like, how can I say, if you want homes to be your specialty, there's a lot of room in that arena as well, because people just have so many questions, right? And they're not going to really get them properly answered by a contractor. So again, mycotoxins are the number one thing that people don't seem to be understanding Mycotoxins and belongings are just kind of our kryptonite when we're trying to get better. We just don't understand. We aren't letting go of them, and we're still sick. So, I'm going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole about some things here. Um, and again, don't feel like you have to memorize all of it. But this one's pretty simple. So mold is a living thing. It's a spore, but mycotoxins are not. They're chemicals, and they're kind of coming off these spores. So you cannot kill a mycotoxin. You can kill mold, but if it still has food, it can come back. But mycotoxins cannot be killed. They can only be transformed into their chemical structure can be transformed into something that's less dangerous. So here's a graphic from surviving mold. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't see mold spores this gigantic, but this is kind of how they look. They have these filaments and they attach to each other, and then they have these spores that the round things. Um, and then the little cloudy things you see coming off are the mycotoxins. So, again, those are chemicals. And mold has spores and a network, and it takes many of them for them to become visible. So, they're still not really visible unless there's many of them all together. Okay, here's where we're going to start going down in the rabbit hole a little bit, because one of my frustrations in this industry right now is that people kind of get their test results and they're like, oh, I have this mycotoxin, like I need the binder for it, like end of story, when it's really a lot more complicated than that. So there are many types of mycotoxins categorized in different ways. Um, and one mold species can produce many mycotoxins, several different kinds, and then it can overlap. So it's not so clear, like, oh, you have this mold and this mycotoxin, A plus B equals C. Like, it's not that simple at all. And the type of mycotoxins that are produced are going to vary. Like if the colony is dry, it's dry, it's not getting moisture, it's going to be under a certain kind of stress and may produce a certain kind of mycotoxin for that. So it's going to change. And then I don't know if I have a slide on this. Yeah. So, and you're not just getting one alone, right? You're getting a whole bunch of different mycotoxins, plus other things like other compounds that are coming off the molds. And plus, if there's been water damage, there could be bacteria in the home, yeast in the home. Plus, there's already chemicals in the home. There's probably EMF in the home. All these things are getting mixed up, and we frankly don't really understand it very well. Here's something really interesting I found, that there also could be some mycotoxins we just don't even know how to measure yet. They're just basically still invisible, unknown to us. So yeah, new mycotoxins are still being discovered, and the mycotoxins can produce their own toxins. Like, it's crazy. Like, there's just a lot to it. So here's some of the structures of different mycotoxins. It's kind of interesting. So you can imagine, like, if they're being transformed, there's like, I don't know what the right, carbons being added or what have you that make them more innocuous. And you can see that there's, so many, and they really do kind of look differently, and they're going to act differently in the body. So this is probably a debatable slide, and I'm not going to get into it too much. But these are some of the things that can potentially neutralize mycotoxins. People will say, can I put something out in the sun? And you can see it's to actually neutralize mycotoxins takes 500 degrees. So no, not really. The most accessible to us is probably different enzymes and essential oils, which are coming now in more prepared forms. And I wanted to kind of highlight that our bodies can neutralize mycotoxins as well. So I don't feel like that gets talked about enough. Like it just seems like we think we just have to like bind it out or poop it out, but our bodies are actually working to transform toxins, right? Any toxin we're exposed to. So one side of that is the liver, and these are some of the processes in the phase 1 liver detox and the nutrients it needs, and some of the processes involved in phase 2. So I know when I was on the FDN webinar, I guess that was just Saturday, somebody was asking, well, what if you have MTHFR issues? So, that could affect one pathway, methylation, but it's something you could support, right? And I don't know if, I think the different mycotoxins are going to be processed in different ways, but I don't know if any of them are completely dependent only on methylation, right? So, and I frankly, I don't think there's a lot of publication being done yet about this, but I did find a few things to share with you guys today. Okay, so here's a couple things that we know, the pathways. Well, actually, the second one, you can see it can be reduced in phase 1 and conjugated in phase 2. But the top one, they said there is no phase 1 and phase 2 they've identified, and only metabolic pathway of the hydrolysis of its side chains. So maybe they're sort of breaking down part of it. It's pretty interesting. So there's a lot of studies done on animals about molds because animals are eating grains often and then they're getting sick. There has not been that much direct study on humans because we can't really give humans, a big dose of mycotoxins to study them. But you can extrapolate and say, well, this is, actually the pigs are the animal they've decided is sort of the closest to humans. And they kind of extrapolate, well, this is probably happening in humans. But as I was learning, it's not all just happening in the liver. Okay. So here's a little bit more about phase 1 liver detox. And I think what I really want to stress here is that we need a lot of nutrients here. We need a lot of B vitamins for one thing. And then there's a lot of free radicals produced from phase 1. So it needs a lot of nutrition, needs a lot of antioxidants. And that's something that I'm stressing more in what I've been teaching is the importance of not just glutathione, of all the antioxidants because of the enormous amount of oxidative damage that can be made from toxins. So it's going to be happening in the liver, but at the cellular level, in the kidney, kind of all over. And then this is just kind of sharing that other chemicals could be or exposure to certain chemicals increase phase 1 activity, leading to high production of phase 1 end products that may not be converted to phase 2. So just, again, to be a little bit more advanced of a practitioner, understanding this relationship that you don't want to push too much. And this is one reason I don't like to do a lot of killing in a client who's not feeling well because they're already trying to detox, they're already in a deficit. And then if you're going to produce more waste for the body to deal with, the body then can get overwhelmed and you get those Herx reactions. And it's pretty serious too, right? Here, if there's increased phase 1 and a decreased phase 2 over time, that can produce things like Parkinson's and cancer. So we're going to talk a little bit about testing in a minute. And most of the testing now is urine testing from mycotoxins, which you probably know. So I was just wondering about what exactly are we testing in the urine? And so we just talked about the liver. and how it does have the ability to transform some mycotoxins. We're going to talk about the gut in a minute. And the kidney does an important job too, which is to take these smaller molecules that are water soluble and filter them out through the urine. So some toxins will, go out and be released through the urine. So one of they said this difficulty is that excretion can be a problem, and the toxins can back up and actually damage the kidneys. And some mycotoxins, and I forget which one right now, but probably more than one, but they can damage the kidney itself. The toxins are nephrotoxic, they're kidney toxic. And then you see here, number 2, mitochondrial dysfunction. There's a lot of that, right, with mold because the oxidative stress to the mitochondria. So if the kidneys don't have enough energy, that can be a problem too. And poor blood flow, I think, can go on too because people aren't exercising, the lymph is backed up, and the blood can get kind of sticky and thick from, all the toxic waste, so to speak. So the kidneys can really kind of take a hit as well. But I got into that because I was thinking about what are we measuring when we do a mycotoxin test of our urine? Because this is not measuring, what's in the stool. And I actually called 2 labs today to try to get a better sense of, are they actually testing the mycotoxin, or are they testing what the mycotoxin's been transformed into through the liver? And they couldn't answer me. I have to email back to the teams, which is fine. But this is just, again, I'm trying to kind of teach you, like, this industry is still growing. And I think we're spitting out words like, oh, I have this mold, I have this mycotoxin, and we're not really understanding what we're even testing for, how we're testing. If we have, multiple molds in the home and there's thousands of mycotoxins, or 500 or whatever, there's probably several different types in our body, and not all of them are going to come out through urine markers. So we're getting like a limited snapshot through the urine. But I think we're lucky in that, the technology is really good for capturing even low levels of mycotoxins. It looks like mostly what they are measuring is what they call unconjugated mycotoxins. So kind of like not fully processed, like haven't gone through phase 2 detox. But I'm not really sure. This is something I want to learn more about for you guys. And then, whoops. Yeah, here's like a little bit about some of the things that they're testing when you actually see these tests. This first one can be secreted through breast milk. So if you just think about, a woman not knowing she's in a home. I mean, this was me, frankly. I didn't know I was in a moldy home. And I got pregnant early living in that home and breastfed in that home. I literally delivered mycotoxins to my son. It's pretty scary. Vibrant measures a higher number of mycotoxins with the same technology. So it is more expensive, but I am kind of leaning towards them because I think you can just catch more. And I just thought I'd share here that they talk about fasting optionally to increase excretion of toxins from fat tissue. So that's interesting as well. It's like, where are these mycotoxins where are they hiding out? And somewhat could be in the fat tissue, and you're potentially, releasing a little fat as you fast. So this also got me to thinking about bile recycling, and does it really make you potentially toxic again? So you may have heard you have to take binders because bile is recycled and that can recirculate toxins. Frankly, I need to learn a little bit more about this. I think I have the wrong source on here. This is from a blog from Mosaic Labs. Oh, no, 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 this is not. This is just a little bit explaining how bile salts are recycled. And they're recycled many times a day. It's going on all the time. This is a little bit about cholestyramine, which you know is a pharmaceutical binder, and how it works. So it was originally meant to lower cholesterol. So we make bile salts from cholesterol. So if we're dumping bile salts out with the binder, then we have to make more. It sort of lowers cholesterol in the process. So that's why, cholestyramine was made. And it can have some benefits for potentially managing blood sugar, although they don't totally know why. But I will say, from looking up bile a little bit, it's so important. It's so important to make bile salts and be kind of pumping them out all the time for detox. However, so this one is, again, when I want to look into a little bit more. Somehow, when these bile salts are recycled in the system between the liver and the gut, the toxins could potentially re-enter. And this part I don't really understand. Like, if the toxin's been transformed, how can it re-enter? So I want to learn a little bit more about that. But another point they make is, even if you use a binder, you've got to be having bowel movements, because a binder can't hold on to it. It's not like a bear hug. It's just kind of gently hanging on. So they still could be released back in. And this is why you're taking bowel movers, taking bile agents, can be really helpful. Taking fibers, anything that keeps the bowels moving and keeps the bile moving is really great for detox. So that's one question I had that I'm still learning a little bit about. And then I was wondering if mycotoxins are being transformed in the gut, because you may know that when estrogens get to the gut, they need a final step to be kind of processed by the bacteria of your gut, or they can recirculate. So I wondered, are mycotoxins the same? I don't necessarily think the bacteria are the last step, but a lot is happening in the gut where the mucosa can transform mycotoxins and different bacteria can transform mycotoxins. This is another study from pigs about how they process a certain toxin that, again, wasn't quite enough to go on, but I'm just interested to learn more about. But here is something really cool I thought you'd like, also from the Mosaic blog, about different binders in the gut. So some lactobacillus strains are binders, some Saccharomyces yeast strains are binders and help for colonization. And then this prebiotic on the bottom is also a binder. So there is a lot of action in the gut. And if the gut is dysbiotic, which it usually is, that's why I think the gut is so important to work on with your mold client or with yourself if you're going through this. So again, to sum it up, I'm not a big fan of matching binders to mycotoxins as anything more than like academic, because I think that you probably have more mycotoxins than you are aware of. So I think it's good to cover your bases and do a variety of binders. That's why we have a variety of binders in our mycotoxin binder, or just rotate. And then do the gut support with the fibers, the bile movers, motility movers. They all kind of work together. Okay, third one here is clinical knowledge. So to call this more, understanding lab testings, knowing how to make a protocol, that kind of a thing. And what I have definitely seen, because clients come to us from other practitioners, is, that maybe the practitioner is running a test, but they don't actually know how to read it because they're still just learning. A practitioner kind of overdoing the protocol, too many things. and then just sort of overspending the client's money, kind of sending them in a very specific direction without understanding the bigger picture. So this can take some finesse to learn how to sort of read a client's situation and where they're at in their journey and pick tools for where they're at and help them pick labs for where they're at, right? So I have some practitioner friends, and I guess it's fine. They may require that the person runs 5 labs right out of the gate to work with them or whatever. And that's great, but not everyone has, $2,500 for 5 labs plus the consultation fee, especially when you're going through mold. So sometimes I'll say to a client, if I had a blank check, I would run X, Y, and Z lab. But here's where I think is the most important right now, and maybe one for later, and what have you. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that this can be, frankly, some ego in kind of telling the client they have to do all these things. Um, the body just wants support and it wants a cleaner environment. And the rest can be a little bit, picked according to the case on how to best support the client. So here's just one quick example of a client I just had recently. And I think that a friend of hers is a health coach or new coach or something, but she ran this mold test for her and told her that her mold was only from food. No, 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 no. So you can see down below here, she's like twice out of range for citrinin, which is aspergillus penicillin. It could be a tiny bit from food, but as I've learned from the same lab, that they've done tests on, people with the average American diet don't really show up as positive for mycotoxins on these tests. It's from buildings. So again, this is just kind of lack of experience. So this client also had some mold home testing. Um, and the inspector said, it's okay, you're okay. But that I don't really buy into either, because if an inspection isn't done right, things can be missed. And this happens a lot. This even happened with Gwyneth Paltrow's mold story. She's got, tons of money, resources, and she was getting sick, and her first inspector couldn't find the mold. So I'm asking this client now to do some retesting, and we talked about, some of her symptoms and the timing. And if you look at her symptoms over here, it's very moldy, so to speak. She brought me some other tests. She has dysbiosis. Her oat test is suggesting she has mold colonization. She has candida. She has bladder issues, 2 different bladder things. And we just talked about the kidneys. Respiratory stuff, insomnia and fatigue are very common. Multiple food sensitivities are common. This woman has a clean diet. Most of my clients come to me already eating well because they're already trying to get better. So where'd she be getting all this mold from food? No, it doesn't make sense. It's just kind of poor training. This is another client I had. The daughter came to me to support her mom, who's 74, was definitely in a moldy home, but was now out living in a care kind of, senior facility. Saw a functional practitioner who tested her for Lyme and heavy metals and gut health and mold. And this is probably only partially what she was put on over here on the left, which is, stuff for Lyme, stuff for mold, just stuff. And it's too much. And the daughter had to go help her 3 times a day to take her pills. She has binders and then other things, and they all are going to be taken separately. This was giving the mom increased anxiety and loose stool. So she wasn't leaving the house. She wasn't calling friends. This to me is almost negligent. This is not a 20-year-old who, is really hardy and can take all this stuff. So seniors, some of the most important things for them is that they're moving their body and they stay social. So we have to look at the client, the age of the client, the background of the client. you can't just throw everything under the sun at your client because you learned it somewhere, right? So we talked about really simplifying her protocol. And in the end, the daughter said, well, we're just going to actually take some time off. And I think that's great. Although she does, she was taking her mom to get acupuncture and she was talking about going shopping with the mom after it. I mean, even that is like just a huge success, right? It's like you don't always need a ton of supplements. Sometimes they're just too much for the client, and sometimes like the cost is too much. So I would not believe anybody who says, oh, you have to get better my way. There's lots of ways to get better, and you do have to customize it, whether it's yourself or your client. Okay, so I basically just said that. You know, I think a sign of how can I say sophistication in your treatment is how little can you give the client to do. And if they want to do more with something like detox protocols or detox techniques, I really like that, then great. But, if you're just piling it on, they're going to get exhausted and they're probably going to have die off. So I don't know if any of you attended my webinar a couple weeks ago on protocols, but I was realizing as I was working with people one on one a little bit more, you definitely have to make sure the foundations are in place, right? Are they pooping? Are they eating well? Are they hydrating? Are they out of mold, ideally? And then what like symptoms are really active for them? Again, if they're not sleeping, you've got to address that. It's a big deal. Um, and then if you've got some things kind of set up, then you can start these what I call the 4 detox blocks. So gut support, binder support, antioxidant support, and detox techniques. I always have clients do one from each category, but they can do more. And then rebuilding systems is kind of something you're doing over time, and maybe with more testing just on the client's budget, because frankly, like, it can be difficult for the body to reboot and come back into line after years of mold exposure. I mean, it was for me. I don't think my hormones ever really recovered, unfortunately. Plus I was getting older. So that kind of rebuilding is sort of the long term thing, and you don't have to rebuild everything all at once. You almost sometimes you may not ever have to do like different killing protocols, because if you've rebuilt the body and detox the body will manage pathogens better. So again, less is more. Your client will thank you, and it's really it's almost hard to resist like overdoing it in our current culture, because we just like to like learn and try things and like go big. But I think there's just a lot of beauty in being slow and consistent. I'll just say consistent. The slow part is nature doing its thing. Just being consistent and, sticking with it is really, I mean, a lot of what's going to get you or your client to where you want to go. I mean, I went through this myself, and there wasn't any fancy technique that saved me. And I did try fancy techniques. It was really just sticking with a good diet and getting movement, using my sauna, dry brushing my skin, washing out my nose, like just these habits I would do every day is what rebuilt or would detox me. And then I did have some testing and special things to kind of rebuild my system. So I'm going to take questions in a minute, but I just wanted to teach you a little bit about the course we have coming up. It's starting in a few weeks. This is our first course we kind of made it for practitioners, but I mean, I saw earlier why asking you guys, it may end up being half and half. It may end up being 70% non-practitioners. I really don't know. But our goal was to make a high-level course that we don't hold anything back, that someone could use to actually practice. So it's a great fit if you are, say, already an FDN and want to know more about mold or specialize in mold. Just you're probably going to have to know about more about mold, right? Or if I think her name was Cecily, if you're going through mold and you think someday I may make a course of it or a career of it, you may want to do my course and a different health coaching course like FDN. You may already be a practitioner. I know some people said yes, or you could just 100% just do this for yourself, because you're gonna make better decisions with your health, with your home, for yourself. I made so many mistakes. I think I have a slide about this. So where did it go? Oh, I lost it. Oh, that's weird. It might come up here, but I found a graphic from a friend of mine on Instagram talking about how much it costs to, um, how costly it is to go through mold, and a lot of the cost that came to me and my family was doing things wrong. If you put all your eggs in a certain basket with some expensive practitioner and some expensive treatment and it didn't help that much, you're going to be upset. For us, we contaminated 2 cars with mold. We contaminated our first house with mold. We ruined a $2,000 air filter with mold. So you can avoid those mistakes and save a lot of money by learning. So whoever ends up coming to the course, we'll take like 45 minutes to an hour for questions every time. So if you're just there to kind of figure out your own case, that's great. And I'm excited that it can really be a group of people who are really passionate about this topic, and we're going to feel supported by each other. So as I mentioned, when I was going through mold, I very isolated. I felt like a weirdo. I didn't have much support. The practitioners I saw kind of hit and miss. Um, so I don't want that for you. I want you to skip as many of the hard parts as possible the first time around. So here's a few aspects of the course, just kind of what we talked about today: environmental, emotional, clinical skills, and really, there's lots of kind of types of people that this may work for. It's really just having an interest in learning mold at a high level. Uh, so here are the lessons, and they just build on each other. Understanding what mold is exactly. I hope it was helpful for you that I really got into today. What are mold? What are mycotoxins? How are they transformed in the body? This information, it can really help you when you're actually working with a client, because you're seeing like, oh, I know that mold affects the thyroid in this way or what have you, so you don't miss things. And client assessment, or if it's for you, you can do a self-assessment, how to work with like special populations like seniors and kids, organizing your treatment plan, testing the body. So we're going to go through some of our favorite tests and tell you how to read them. Same for home testing, remediation, that kind of thing. Getting a little bit more technical here: drainage pathways, binders, gut infections, mold related symptoms. So, how is it things like the brain affected, weight affected, how to treat things specifically, and then retesting and kind of moving forward. So, I'm teaching the first two and the last two lessons, and then Coach Mickey is teaching the 4 in the middle, but we'll always be together on all the calls. So this is a link to it and the coupon code for it. Oops. I'll show this again in a second. Oh no. One sec, guys. Sorry about that. Okay. I'm so sad I lost my slide about the cost of mold. I'll have to find that. I must have accidentally erased it. Um, Here's a little bit about Mickey and I. Again, this is our first time offering this course. So the only reviews I could put up were one of like client sessions we've had. But Mickey and I have been, working with people with mold for quite a while now. And I think what kind of makes us both good practitioners is that we are very good listeners, we're very empathetic, but we also have a lot of technical knowledge, and we deliver really strong protocols to people after the sessions. I also got some of my practitioner friends or home friends to donate to this course. So we have $1,100 in different bonuses from companies like Immunolytics and We Inspect and Laura Adler. So we have a few more too, but some actual like free test kits and stuff. So it's pretty exciting. Oh, here it is. Here's the molds graphic I was talking about. So again, I feel like the mistakes you can make are really costly, right? And this thing is going to cost you whether you like it or not, unfortunately. But if you can make better decisions, you will save money. And I think that's the benefit of education, right? It's like this course is just to educate you, to give you tools to feel. Oops. Here we go. To feel more at peace really is, I think, a big one, because you're going about this the right way. I know for me, I had a lot of anxiety, like, am I getting better? Am I doing this right? It's no fun. It's no fun to live like that. So it's more that we can minimize of that, the better. And then, I think having us as a resource to ask questions is going to feel really good. And then again, not making mistakes like I made, like some of us have in the process, where you're like, ugh, why did I spend money on that? And that didn't even work or whatever. We're going to try to avoid that. And as you're a practitioner, if you can guide people in this way, they're going to be so thankful. It's going to be amazing. So we kind of went over all this already. Oops, I forgot to put the actual price of the course. The early bird price of the course is $997 or $995. And then I have a little coupon code for the next 2 days, just because I'm anxious to get some people in and feel like this is really going. It starts on the 7th. And there's the coupon code right there. Again, this is a brand new link, a brand new page. So if you run into any glitches or anything, just please let us know. But there's more details on the page. You can use this QR code to get there as well. And I'll push the link through before the Q&A. And yeah, I just really want to thank you to be on here. I know online businesses can feel like we're so far apart, but I'd really love to have you and get to know you better in this more intimate course. This is me and my son and Flagstaff, and I'm a real person who's been through this. And I obviously really enjoy talking about it and educating you about it. And yeah, I can tell you my own health has completely transformed. I can bike faster than my teenage son. And yeah, would love to help you on your journey as well. Although this is not a business course per se, you can ask those questions, and I think you'll see by the way we put things together, you'll get some inspiration, and we'll have some tools for you for your practice as well. Okay. 1 second here. Okay, I see some questions already in the chat, and I will post the link to the program there too. And the coupon code is FAST50. Again, just email us if anything isn't working for you, if you have any questions. Okay. Oh, Karen is in Portland, Oregon, a mold inspector and a wellness coach. Yay! Oh, that's so exciting. I love it. Wow. Okay. Well, that's so great. I'd love to hear more about that. Melanie, yeah, the same link is the replay. You may have already left, but if you want to rewatch this, the same link is the replay. I'll put it on the out an email too. And I may do like an encore webinar, just another live one. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I will give you the slides as well. If you couldn't see things very well, sometimes the slides are like a little hard to read. Julie, I don't use my Myco lab. As far as I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's a blood lab and it's measuring for antibodies to mold. So it's not giving you as much information about the load of mold or like when you're exposed. Although I will say, just like I said earlier, like none of this is perfect. So even like, let's say it looks like you have low levels of mycotoxins, it doesn't mean you're not very sick. So there isn't, I mean, this is still like just emerging, and you have even Vibrant Wellness says that in their information. It's like you have to ask like the background questions and kind of correlate and get the home testing. But no, I don't use my Myco lab. Are you finding Lyme most times with mold? We just started to test for mold recently. So some people come to us knowing they have Lyme or knowing they have mold. And, yeah, it's very common because mold is so depleting to the immune system that any kind of infections that are already in you can thrive. So that's why you see Lyme and EBV and, parasites all coming up. So you can test it all or not. I do think it's more important, in my opinion, to test for mold. And the Lyme treatments can be pretty harsh. So to me, I would say like do that later if needed, in my opinion. But if you're a practitioner like in Maine, I just talked to one yesterday, you may see Lyme is more like predominant, and you may be treating that altogether. I don't see that like as much, and I'm not as strong of a Lyme practitioner. So I hope that helps. How do you know and test for Lyme? Yeah, so we have one, I forget what company it is. Lyme testing is better done through like a private lab. And I think IGenics is the one I took a little course with recently, and they sent me a test for myself to use. It's a blood test. They aren't perfect though either. You can get some false negatives. Marianne asked I said I wash my nose out. So the machine, the thing I use is called a Neil Med sinus wash. It's like a neti pot, but it's a squeezy bottle and it has these little salt packets. It's just a little like easier to use than a neti pot, in my opinion. And then you just squeeze it through. And then we also sell a silver nasal spray that has some herbs in it, and you can use that like afterwards. You could use that alone if you're in a hurry. But when I was really sick, I just feel like I had a lot of lymph and like in my head. I had a Marcon's nasal infection too. And just doing that rinsing, it just seemed to be like necessary for me for a couple of years until I didn't need it anymore. Okay, Jess said he had an in-home mold test. Can you refer someone I can review the mold results with so I understand them? Yeah, Jeff, there's a company called ERMI Code. If you had an ERMI that uses like a software and does a consult, well, they use a software and it's pretty cheap. They just run your results through and can tell you like the risk in your home. If you want like a consultation on your results, I do not like reading ERMIs. I don't feel like they're very helpful, but maybe Karen does, who's on this call. And then you may be able to bring your results to we inspect our home cleanse for just like to review your results. But I would look at the ERMI code first. I think it's pretty great and a great price. But I put those companies in the chat. That so it's we inspect and home cleanse. I know it's a lot to understand those results, but I think it's evolving. Okay, so what do you do about MARCONs and what does it mean and what do you do if someone tests positive? Okay, so MARCON stands for multiple antibiotic resistant staph, some kind of staph infection in the nose. So it can test for this overgrown staph that happens when immunity is depleted. And sometimes it's also going to find mold strains in the nose. So if you have the MARCONs, there's been depleted immunity, and that's often from exposure to mold. The depleted immunity and the staph, I'm trying to think. So we make a certain amount of melatonin like in this nasal area. And so one symptom can be poor sleep. And it could be, stuffy nose and respiratory stuff, but it's not 100% has to be there. Could be poor sleep. And most of us, I think, if we're exposed to mold a long time, are going to, sorry, I lost my train of thought, are probably going to end up with some nasal imbalance. I know Dr. Jill Krista does a lot of nasal treatment, probably more than me. I will say that some people in the mold community now treat MARCONs later in the process, if at all, because it's a little hard to overcome. You might have to do actually antibiotic prescription rinses. But overall, reducing that mold load in the body through sauna and nasal rinses and getting out of mold, I think it's often like enough for that to improve. But I will say you can look at Jill Krista's work because I know she's more into the nasal treatments as being really important. But personally, I wouldn't focus on them if you have a bigger picture of like a home you're trying to move out of and everything. I wouldn't put it as like the top priority. Okay, Francis. Okay, I did have this in a slide, Francis. But yeah, the Saccharomyces boulardii has been studied a lot. I don't know in the Bacillus subtilis, but did you see the slide on that? I don't know if you were here for that. I might be able to post that again later. Kelly said, yeah, this is kind of what I was researching, Kelly. Are mold metabolites found in urine, and only some in feces or sweat. You can sweat out a lot of things, but so I don't know if you can sweat out like fat soluble and water soluble compounds. I'm not really sure. But in the feces, yeah, I think this is like a question mark on this. I don't think all of them go to urine. No. So that's why I think any urine test we do is going to be a little bit lacking in a sense. But there's a lot of them that go to urine. So I think it's still a good test. And I think you rarely see a false negative. But yeah, it would be interesting I haven't really seen a fecal test for mycotoxins. I don't know. But yeah, I think the short answer is I think different things are processed in different ways. So it is a little hard to measure and know. 1 second. Thomas said, we did a dust test. It came back with lots of mold, but no mycotoxins. Is that possible? If you don't have mycotoxins, do you have to get rid of belongings if you move? Yeah, this is a good question. So, did you have, Thomas, more innocent, like non toxic types of mold? Um, yeah, this is a good question. It's kind of tricky. I would say this, it's only one sample, and I don't know where you collected the dust. It doesn't necessarily mean you have don't have mycotoxins. If you have people sick in the home, if there's been, maybe several or significant water damage, you've been in the home a long time, I think those belongings are still risky. So I wouldn't take it to the bank that you can bring those things with you. Aspergillus is and the titanium, I think, are both toxic. So maybe you could ask the testing company, Thomas, their thoughts on that, because I would have thought you would see mycotoxins. We did learn earlier, right, that they produce mycotoxins at different times in different environmental conditions. So, I mean, again, I think it could be getting like missed. Really interesting, though. See, this is why it gets tricky. Karen, yeah, Army Code is through We Inspect, but I think they have their own little website called Army Code. Oh, and Karen can read Armies. Karen, you can share your info if you want. Oh, okay. This is a good one. Um, she says she's the only one in the family reacting to mycotoxins. Are the other families not having symptoms but having effects? I think every body is going to be affected eventually. But, well, let me take that back. Things are happening behind the scenes, right? Like your gut is going to become over time more dysbiotic, but it probably depends, like how long are you in the mold, what is your diet. Some people may leave the house more than others, so they're less affected. Some people may just be better detoxers. But if you think about what's happening slowly in the body, how the mycotoxins we didn't even talk about can like penetrate the brain, they can affect the adrenals, they can affect the liver, they can affect the kidneys. I'd say yes, everyone's going to be affected. It's just a matter of how and when. Um, and it's a bummer when it seems like only one person in the family is being affected. But, of course, I think we still need to react to that, right? Like if only one person in the family had cancer, we wouldn't be like, well, too bad. It's like just you. I know it's harder to understand or harder to kind of deal with because it affects everyone if you're having to move and all that. But um, yeah, it's still like priority, right? And yeah, the other people are going to be affected over time. And if you look at a really long list of possible symptoms, um, they may be having symptoms you're not aware of, like bedwetting or attention deficit or depression or anger or something like that. Barbara, Karen, or no, Karen, Barbara would like your website if you wouldn't mind. Yeah, we're going to run the course probably not again till April. I think we'll launch it again in March and then run it in April and May. So maybe twice a year. Honestly, I don't know if we'll run it forever, but I'm going to try to do it twice. How important to get rid of all your clothes in order to heal? And when you feel guilty trying to sell things. So here's the thing, like, however sick you become from your stuff is because it was you in there for a long time with all the stuff. So if you have, a yard sale and sell somebody like 3 books, they're not going to get sick to death from it. But if you don't feel comfortable, you can just dispose of it. But it is really different, right? Like even if someone comes over to your house, they're probably not going to leave sick because they don't live there. They're not in it all the time. So if your stuff is going a little bit here, a little bit here, it's probably not going to make people really sick. I would say, Jason, like if you've been in that place, if your belongings have been in that place a while, and you're significantly sick, odds are it's going to happen all over again if you bring everything with you. So it's just in the end not worth it. There are like enzyme cleaners for laundry and like for surfaces. And I just see very mixed to poor results on those working like well enough. Um, so that's basically my answer, unfortunately. But you don't have to buy everything new at once. You can be very minimal and then like slowly add things. Another technique I teach people to do is put things in storage and then revisit them later. Because might think, oh, I need all these things, but you go put them in storage for 3 months and you open the door and you feel disgusting. You feel so sick. Well, now you kind of have more evidence that those things make you sick, and you can decide then. Tara said, can you clean clothing E6000? I think, is that an EC3 product? Yeah, it might be. Yeah, I mean, there's different cleansers like borax and enzyme cleansers for clothing. I can tell you I've used those and they just weren't enough for me to be able to keep my clothes. Okay, I think this might be the last question we'll take is from Francis. Okay, so the actinomyces is like a bacteria, right? Or is it a yeast, Francis? And the ERMI being relatively benign. Do you think there's a mold issue? Well, there's probably some kind of moisture issue. I don't love the ERMI test. I would just look at the bigger picture. Like, have you got the house inspected for actual water damage? What's the humidity in the house? What are the symptoms in the house? Unfortunately, we do see a lot of this like testing, like there's gaps and you're like, wait, does this quite make sense? So you can either just sort of do more testing in other ways, get other inspectors, you kind of have to consolidate all the results. This person is saying she finds that several times with hydrogen peroxide works for her. Jason, yeah, we are seeing clients as well. So if you attended this and you're like, I don't want the course, I just want to like work with you guys, let me give you a link for that. We really like to work with people one-on-one as well. So 1 second. So you can tell just by being here, people have a lot of questions. And so it's kind of our goal with the course to take people through all of it, right? Because you're going to have questions about testing, questions about protocols, questions about the home. And we have answers. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so there's a link for working with us privately, and I'll have to put that in the replay as well. And then let me put this up in one more time as well. 1 second. This is, oops, that's not the right one. Okay. Sorry. So this is the course again, and then I'll have this coupon code for $50 off up through tomorrow. And we may do another encore just to take more questions. Yeah, you're welcome, Karen. But yeah, I really want this course to be, I really think the value can be really high for you because it will save you a lot of time and mistakes. And if you do this as a career, it's like a great investment. You can make it back with one client. And really, I think the community of, people who are all on this path is going to be really exciting and really great. So I hope to have you. If you have any questions that weren't answered on the page, please just let me know. I just show you real quick. This is the program page. You'll see if you go there. And just more details. Also, I have the whole entire schedule on here, right here. And yes, we will make recordings too. And all the like little details are on here. We have a frequently asked questions section. So again, would love to have you. And thanks for being on today. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks, Barbara. And oh, sorry, I'm just looking at everything. A payment plan. What we're gonna have to do with the payment plan, and I do have this on the page. It might. Let me see if I can. We couldn't get the cart to like do it right without glitching out, so we can do it manually for you. So if you want to just reach out to us, we can set it up manually for you. But you can see that on the page as well. What? Okay, getting. Carol says, yes, you put stuff in storage. Yeah, it can be hard. It's emotionally hard to let go of stuff. Cicely said, what test to start with? Well, for your body, or your house. For the body, I do like the Vibrant Wellness test right now, as kind of my favorite. And for the house, it's a little different because if you own or rent, but there's a newer test called the dust test, and they'll test for spores and mycotoxins, and they'll do a consultation. So I'll put that in the chat for you, Cicely. Great. Well, appreciate you everyone showing up this evening, and I'll be sending out the slides and replay by email. And have a great night. Bye, everybody.